everybody. I know that there are still some folks popping on and off, but I'll go ahead and get started. I know we only have 45 minutes today, and I hope to cover quite a bit. Thank you all for being here. My name is Rebecca Mobley. I'm the Director of Marketing and Public Relations for State Farm Stadium in Arizona. We are home of the Arizona Cardinals and the annual Fiesta Bowl. So we have a couple of events that are in our building every year. And I'm not an HR, so I'll go ahead and say that right now. But what I've been doing over the past 6 or 7 years is helping my friends and colleagues put their resumes together. And I found that, especially within the marketing world and the marketing professionals, we can talk a lot about other events and other things that we're doing. We have a really hard time talking about ourselves and promoting ourselves with the best foot forward. So I hope I have a deck put together that I'll go through, but I hope today that hopefully y'all can take a few nuggets of things that I've learned along the way to help you get your resumes together. I know that it's been a crazy year, so a lot of people are in different spaces within your current job situation, so I'll try and cover as much of that as possible too. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. When I tested this the first time, I wasn't able to see people's faces when I had my deck up. So I won't be able to see your face or see if you have questions or anything. So leave it in the chat, and I'll get started. So, give me 1 second. Sorry, y'all. Are y'all able to see it?
That looks great.
Cool. Awesome. Well, there you go. This is me building your resume. Hopefully you already have a resume. I'm sure that you do. And we'll take a deep dive into the different components of your resume today to get it more modern and hopefully put it at the top of the HR deck when you are submitting your resume. So we'll go over the different components that I see as components. The header, summary of qualifications, which is like the summary of qualifications at the top of your resume, the job history portion, education, and then personal experience in volunteer work. So on your header, what I call the header is the beginning of your resume. So I feel like that's what people look at. Typically, it just has your name and contact information. What I've seen over the years is that even HR people are kind of stalky. So when you have your address in there, it can hinder you in 2 ways. The first way is if you are not in the location that you're trying to apply for a job, they might go ahead and take you just out of the pile because you're not local and they don't want to deal with moving or anything along those lines. And
yeah, I'm turning one down though. Hey everyone, if you're listening to 2 sessions at once, please pick one. It's picking up audio from your other tab from the other session that you're in. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks. So again, if you have your address in there, it could preclude you from getting a job in a different market. And then also too, Zillow and Google Maps is a thing right now too. So you don't want to put your address in there, even if you are applying for something local, for somebody to see where you live, whether you're in an apartment or you're at your parents' house at the moment. Just leaving it out altogether is the best way to go about that one. And then the other one that I have mixed feelings on is your LinkedIn accounts. If your LinkedIn account just looks like your resume, don't include it. Mine candidly looks just like my resume, so I never include it on mine. However, there are people who use LinkedIn and it's very robust and they include a lot of different information that doesn't fit on your resume. If that's the case and if that's you, definitely include that and allow your HR managers to see all of the things that you're doing. All right, summary of qualifications. This is the box at the top. This is actually a summary of qualifications of a resume that I've done recently in the last couple of months. And I want to show you where it started and then where it was. So y'all can read, this is the bullet points that were put together at the very top of the resume. So the summary of qualifications need to be very hard hitting, especially since these are the first bullet points that someone is going to see. So I'll start at the first one, at the first bullet point. Sorry, my lights went off in my office. Instead of saying extensive experience, make sure that you're showcasing the amount of time that you've been in the industry, whether it's 2 years or it's 10 plus years. Extensive experience means a lot of things to a lot of different people, so quantifying it will really help drive home the amount of industry experience or experience in general that you do have.
Sorry, Rebecca. Sorry to interrupt.
The second bullet point. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It seems as though your slideshow is stuck on the first page.
No.
Yeah,
let me stop sharing. It is? Okay, let me stop sharing and I'll try it one more time. And then I'll put it into the chat too. Sorry, guys. All right, trying this again. All right, so it's in the chat. That's the presentation that I'm going through. Sorry, guys. And let me try it one more time. If not, I can just talk through it since you have it now. And we're going to share screen one more time. Technological issues. All right, is that what y'all can see?
Yes, can see it now. Thank you.
Okay. That one's not letting me go through it.
I will call for assistance with this bug. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Did it switch?
Rebecca, I'm here. This is Jamie with Evented. So you're trying to change the slide that's being presented?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you go back to screen sharing real quick? If not, we could just skip the presentation and talk about it.
Sure.
You could also link it in your speaker bio for others to reference later on. So from here,
yeah, and I dropped it in the chat.
Okay, are you? Yeah, so I can see the header. Do not include address.
Do not include address. There. I'm just going to leave it on this if that's fine, instead of going back into full screen mode.
Yeah, this is totally fine. I see the summary of qualifications now.
Sweet. Sorry, y'all.
You're a rock star. No worries.
Rolling with the punches. Okay, so I'll start on the summary of qualifications again. First bullet point, make sure to quantify your experience. On the second bullet point, make sure that you get your numbers towards the beginning of the sentence. So even though it's responsible for marketing budgets of $1+ million, adding $1+ million with a return on revenues of 5+ at the beginning of that statement makes it much more bold and much more effective. Also, too, when you are doing things like Facebook certified digital marketing and Google Ads, make sure that you're including all of the information, like your secondary skills and some of the continuing education that you've done, into one. So it doesn't look like you're just trying to add fluff into your summary of qualifications. And then also too, when you have something at the very top of your resume, and some people do and some people don't, make sure you're not pigeonholing yourself. So if you're going to get a job, you were a promoter, now you're looking at venues, make sure that you're showcasing the breadth of experience that you have instead of just showcasing the successes that you've had within the field that you come from. So when people have work gaps in their resume, these are very important because it showcases a lot of the skills and assets that you can bring without getting too low on the page within the resume. So this is what we worked on, and we got it to this point. So going from extensive experience to 9 years, moving those numbers to the front, and then showcasing a lot of things in terms of numerical assets. So people want to see what you've accomplished, and numbers are a great way to do that. Luckily, with event marketers, we have a lot of numbers that we can work with, whether it's the number of events that we've done, the dollar spends that we have within our ad budgets. There are so many things, and use what works for you and what showcases the successes that you've had the best. All right, job history is where a lot of people, they kind of get stuck in a mentality of what they've done in their jobs, like copying and pasting from your job description and putting it into your job history instead of highlighting the work and the accomplishments that have been had. So make sure that you're showcasing all of the things that you have successfully done, created, worked on, collaborated with within your job history instead of just saying responsible for media on event days, something along those lines, which could technically be in your job description. And then focus, we talked a little bit about it, but focus on quantifying the position, whatever that looks like for you. Numbers, gross, assets, ticket sales, all of the things are so important and are super transferable, even though we sometimes don't look at it that way. Also, too, and this is kind of counterintuitive, but putting the most impressive highlights first, not saving them for last. So we're not building up to all of the things that you've done and culminating with something that was the most impressive thing. It's putting those highlights at the very beginning and starting off with them as soon as possible. You want to make sure that when someone's reading this, and a lot of times they're skimming the information, that the first 2 or 3 bullet points are super hard hitting. And when they bounce down to another component of your job history, those 2 or 3 at the very beginning are also very impressive. They may not make it into the 4th, 5th, 6th bullet point. If you're in a position where you were, let's say, an intern, you moved into an account executive role and you're working your way up within the company, highlight why. Highlight why the company has marked you as someone who they want to move forward with within your organization. Was it a project that you worked on? Was it a benchmark that you hit? All of those things tell the story about your progression within your job history and are super important. What I tell people too is not to not include, if it's the same company, a promotion within that company. So you may have one company as the highlight of your job history, but including all of the different positions that you've worked within that company, go ahead and include that on there. It's important. Don't just start with your ending position. And a couple little nuggets for those re-entering the industry. I know it's hard because you were in the industry, then you're not in the industry. You may have gotten another job just to get you by, and you want to come back into the sports and events industry. So when you're looking at getting your resume back together, put your most relevant industry experience at the top. So that's not discounting the work that you've done within the past 2 years or a year, however long it's been, but making sure that the relevant industry experience is as close to the top of your job history or professional experience as possible. That's also not saying not to include the work that you've done within the gap. So make sure to include that, but only maybe do 1 or 2 bullet points for that information if you're applying for a position within the industry. Also, industry adjacent experience, definitely include that. So if you were working for Feld, for example, and then you got a position at an AV company that's local, I would say that that's industry adjacent and definitely not something not to include. So make sure that you're giving yourself enough credit for where you've been and where you're going, and hopefully the blip on your resume will only be just that, and that's just for furloughs or layoffs. All right, I'm sure that all of you have varying educational scenarios, but the most important things are to not include your graduation dates. It'll date you, whether you're older or younger, so it's better just to leave it as you obtain this degree from this institution and call it a day. Don't include your GPA. It really doesn't mean anything, and it can help you or hinder you depending on who's looking at your resume. And also to include any relevant continuing education certificates. So whether you did like a leadership conference or anything along those lines that would be relevant to the position that you're obtaining, it showcases that you not only take worth in what you're doing, but also that you want to grow and to succeed. So even though they may not be a bachelor's or a master's or anything, they are important, and people will look at that. All right, and now these are the two that typically roll towards the bottom of resumes, which I feel are discounted a lot with people who are doing their resumes. So personal experience, which is, I call it volunteer work, but it's personal experience on my resume, so that's just what we're rolling with. But showcasing what you've done within the community, especially if you're looking at a position within the community, is very important. It shows that you have connections and that you're a go-getter and you can go out there and make friends and contacts within different organizations that's not directly tied to what your position is. Use this as an extension of your job history. So set it up almost like your professional experience. Have bullet points, have benchmarks, any sort of successes that you've had within your volunteer experience should definitely be included on the professional or on the personal experience. Any leadership capacities. So, for instance, if you are part of the team that's putting on EAMC this year, include that. There are things that you may not think will highlight you in a way that says who you are and what you're doing, but it will come through that way. And also, too, if you're re-entering the industry, make sure to get that community involvement on there. If you spent your time getting people to the polls or giving away food at shelters, get that on there. I mean, it can't hurt at this point, and it showcases the well-roundedness of who you are as a person. So, with that, I am stopping sharing. I am back. And then I will open it up for questions. So I'm open to anything. Again, I'm not an HR professional, but I can help you maybe think through some of the ways in which you're framing your resume to be more towards the top of this stack. So fire away if you want to put it into the chat or if you want to speak up.
Rebecca, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the order in which you did it the order you recommend you list the items?
That's what I would say. I think it goes from what I feel like an HR manager sees and what they're looking at the most. So even though your summary of qualifications at the top is kind of like the very beginning of it, it's the heaviest hitter that you'll see. And then education, again, it's towards the bottom because at this point, if you have 10, 12, 20 years of experience within the industry, I mean, you at some point, what does education mean in that capacity? So yeah, I do. I think that the job components and what you've done highlight you and your successes more than like an education or a philanthropic aspect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Justin has a question on 1-page versus 2-page resumes. This one is always a conversation. So I've been in the industry 12 years now, and I just went to 2 pages within my last hop to my next job. So I think it's condensed as it can be as possible is always the best, while also realizing that your successes might take up 2 pages. It just depends. And also to have colleagues, have friends, have people in this conversation look at your resume and say what you might think is super successful may not be that to them. So being able to whittle down and take the highlights of your resume and putting them into that 1 page or like maybe a 2-page, it's up to you. Long story, depends on how long you've been in the industry, I would say. 5 years minus, definitely stick to 1 page. Ooh, Becca. That's a really good question. So Becca's question in the chat is she started her own business, congratulations, while she was furloughed. So where that is included on her resume she's having a hard time with. I would definitely say that starting your own company, that's professional experience. Those are skills and assets that you have now that are ways to describe you, entrepreneurial ways to describe you that you didn't have earlier. So including some of the highlights from your new job or your new business and showcasing how those transition into the industry and what that looks like, definitely professional experience. And Becca, if you don't mind, where else did you think it should go?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've kind of just been battling. So I'm in the sports industry, and I started a healthy food blog page just for fun. I've always enjoyed cooking, and basically just kind of blew up during COVID. And so now I'm kind of using that as a side hobby to make a second income. So working with paid partnerships, I'm on every social channel, I run my own website, all of that. So I wasn't sure if, since I'm back in the sports industry again, if I should kind of put it on the side of more of like the personal experience as opposed to professional, just because I didn't want to like blend the two.
Sure, and that makes total sense. I definitely still think that what you've accomplished within the COVID timeframe, doing all of those things, and they were skills that you didn't have before. So including that within professional experience, I would definitely include it there. One other note too, depending on where life travels in the next couple of years, you might look at having two completely different resumes, one for your sports and events industry, and then your next for your blogging components. So taking a look at that too, and there's nothing to say that they have to look similar. It's two different industries. They're two different things. So that might be something that you look at in the next couple of months to see which one you want to move forward with. All right. And Katie has a question on visually appealing resumes. And you answered the question within your question. Know your audience. So if your resume is standard and you're getting a finance position, accounting, anything along those lines, know your audience and who's going to be looking at it. If you're a marketing person and you're looking to get a job within the cruise industry, I would definitely say that creating a visually appealing resume definitely doesn't hurt anything. There's also a note too, like we talked about with Becca, is to have multiple. So whether you, if you're applying for different positions, you can go ahead and include, or you can submit whichever one you feel like would be the best fit. Yeah, you're welcome. We haven't talked a lot about it, and I'm not sure if our next session, if Marla's going to talk about cover letters, but I did want to touch on cover letters quickly. I always feel like cover letters are the bane of my existence. I don't know who's actually reading them, and it's a lot of words, right? And we're talkers and writers, and that's what we do. So I would, when you're doing a cover letter, you definitely still need to have a cover letter, which I wish one day we don't have to have cover letters, but we do at this juncture. So make sure you have one, and include a lot of like the fluff that you feel like is on your resume within your cover letter. So any of those like soft skills, like I'm a good public speaker, I have experience in XYZ, that may not be more of the more heavy hitting, like ROI type of skill sets. Get those into your cover letter. It's also a really great opportunity to have the conversation ahead of time with whomever you're interviewing with. So if you do have a gap in your resume, if you do have a side hustle, if you have any of those sort of things, your cover letter is a good way to start that conversation and hopefully transition that conversation into a face-to-face interview. For just in terms of formatting, I love formatting. So the header of your resume, I always think should match the header of your cover letter to keep them. If somebody does have like the two packets together, you can flip through it and it's easily identifiable that that's who you are and that they're looking at the same information. So if you do have a visually appealing like colors and graphs and graphics type of resume, make sure that that transcends over into the cover letter too. It doesn't exactly have to match, but make sure that they go together, right? And that's to say too, if you have just a fairly standard resume, pop that over into your fairly standard black and white cover letter and let it rip. Any other questions on either cover letters, which I knew I blew through, or resumes? And what I'm going to do too is include my information, my contact information into the chat. So if you want to throw me your resume or your cover letter, I am happy to look at it. So I'll do that right now. There you go. Now you know how to get me. Great. Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else have any little nuggets that they want to talk through? All right.